Yeah, just checking if we are live. I think we are.
Yeah, I see the little red dot.
Yes, we are live. All right, I'll do a quick introduction and then we'll get started with the conversation. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Hey, GM everyone. Welcome to Full Time DAO, a live stream with DAO contributors exploring the inner workings of decentralized autonomous organizations and Web3 communities. I am Salman. I've been part of and contributing to DAOs for over a year now. And let me tell you, you can never get enough. There's so many exciting projects in the ecosystem, a lot of people coming together on the internet, bringing their skills and passions with them, leveraging what Web3 has to offer today to design organizations that is organizing towards whatever mission it is the DAO is looking to accomplish. Over the last couple of years, might I say, a lot of DAOs have come and gone. Some survive and very few thrive. But what makes one different from the other? And why do these DAOs start in the first place? I, for one, strongly believe DAOs are here to stay and offer a glimpse of what future of work might look like. And in order for us to really appreciate that, I think it's valuable to learn from projects that once have or continue to see the light of the day and show us what's possible with decentralized work. That's what we aim to do with this show. And my goal is to cover every single DAO that is out there and hear their stories from Discord and beyond. Today, I have with me Spencer Cavanaugh, who goes by Clinomanic on Discord, who's going to take us through his journey as formerly a core contributor in PubDAO and Lobby3 and a founding member of JournoDAO. PubDAO is a media collective built around a content as a service model. Lobby3 is a decentralized advocacy organization, and JournoDAO are building the future of journalism using Web3 tools. Spencer also consults early stage DAOs in his venture Clinomanic LLC. As this is a pilot, I consider this a bit of an experimental episode, and I look forward to having a good chat with Spencer and exploring the world of DAOs. By the way, I'm also going to be submitting this episode on Lil Non's Prop House round that is focused on increasing voter participation through delegation. I will talk about this a little later in the show. Okay, I'm going to add Spencer now into the stream, and let's get this started. Uh, how are you doing, Spencer?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you for joining on what I said is a kind of an experimental episode. To begin with, I think I was going through like PubDAO and JournoDAO and Lobby3 and all that. And one thing I noticed is that you are on the announcements of all of these servers. So that says that says that you are a core contributor in here. So how about we just get started getting to know you? And before that, I thought like just as like a snapshot of where you are in life at the moment. Maybe that's where we can get started. What are you doing right now, and how are you involved with the DAO ecosystem?
That's what I've been focusing on for the last couple months. I have a couple of clients now still piloting.
Uh, uh, can you just repeat that like all over because I think I missed. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. There might be a little lag. I'm not sure if there is or not, but I can
And
repeat that.
it's a live stream. I just wanna say like upfront, like there could be errors and things like sometimes go. Yeah, let's hope that all of that does not happen and we can proceed with a nice conversation. But you never know.
Sure, yeah, I can take it again. Right now, I'm basically just getting started as a consultant, having learned from the few DAOs that you mentioned there and what works and what didn't, and then seeing if there's any kind of demand for consulting advice or contracting advice for someone to come in and help an organization set up some of its. Basically, I'm just trying to.
Mm, I heard some of that. I don't know whether it's just me. Like, Parda, do you think? Are you on a good network, Spencer? I think you are.
I can. Would it help if I turned off my video? I'm not sure if that would help.
Okay, let's continue this way. Let's continue this way, and then we'll see. But yeah, I got that you're consulting with DAO projects right now. So, what does consulting with DAOs look like? Like, what kind of organizations do you work with, and at what stages?
Early stage right now. I mean, the couple clients I have right now are like early stage, kind of public goods oriented projects. So like the other DAOs you mentioned that I was involved with all have some kind of a public goods angle to them. Um, but yeah, like generally nonprofit public goods. They like dissent. Oh, are you talking to?
No, I'm not. I'm listening to you actually. I think the video, like, maybe we should turn off the video.
Oh, okay.
Like, yeah, this.
Yeah, I think that was
It
distracting.
sucks that this happened, but yeah, yeah.
Me.
Li- Yeah, yeah. I'm really sorry about that. Like, it's really, I think I have to get a new tool. But I think let's do the conversation this way so that I hope there's no like audio issues from here.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to continue just audio only.
Yeah. Yes, you're saying about like your journey as like in consulting with DAOs and like how you work with DAOs at the initial stages and with public goods as like your area of interest. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and I like the idea of having some, like helping other organizations that aren't nonprofits or public goods oriented, and then just charging that as a service. But I also like the idea of helping nonprofits or public goods startups or early stage DAOs, almost like a pro bono or pseudo bono way. So, but again, I'm still figuring out all this stuff. I don't quite have any experience in terms of finding like a product market fit for these kind of consulting services.
Do you feel like non-profits serve as a good base for like what turning into a DAO?
I think so. I mean, at least what I'm finding there is that the nature of nonprofits and the nature of the funding they get, usually philanthropic funding, doesn't come with the kind of strings attached that would come with VC funding or any other kind of dilutive funding or funding that comes with expectations of return on investment. Usually, that the nature of that kind of funding sets the whole tone for how an organization goes about its operations and what their quotas are. Whereas I tend to find nonprofits are more mission oriented.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. Do you also contribute to DAOs currently?
Yeah, right now the main one is JournoDAO still, and we've got a cool new project that we've getting started on now. So happy to go into details there when there's time for that. But yeah, you also mentioned PubDAO and Lobby3. I'm no longer involved with either of those. At Lobby3, we've just winded down. So happy to talk about lessons we've learned there. But yeah, right now it's JournoDAO and then Education DAO is it's an early stage DAO that I'm consulting, and then we'll also probably be a member of as well.
Got it, got it. So let's start with like let's do a quick background. What's your background before you got into DAOs, and what led you to DAOs?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so my background's actually in filmmaking of all things. I studied screenwriting. I worked a little bit as a screenplay evaluator. Worked in reality television as a PA for a few years, a few odd
Wow.
jobs here and there. Yeah, it's totally unrelated. And then I got into all this technology through speculation, shocker, learning about cryptocurrencies on Coinbase and getting started with the basics of investing there, and then uh, gradually becoming more acquainted with the notion of public goods and how smart contracts work and what is really possible with this technology and how it can change how people collectively come to decisions and organize themselves in new transparent ways, and all of that really ideologically appealed to me. I still see a great potential for this technology.
And in like, what was your like first entry point into a DAO? What was PubDAO the very first DAO you joined?
Yeah, I think so. I remember learning about PubDAO through a post on Decrypt. It was created by Decrypt, and it was originally a decentralized newswire And so I got involved there and I think contributed some content, and then gradually got a bit more and more involved in terms of organizing stuff and suggesting projects and helping with some administrative stuff. So yeah, I think PubDAO was the first DAO that I was involved with.
And what has been your journey inside PubDAO ever since joining? What kind of activities have you indulged in, and what has been your kind of work profile within the DAO?
Most of it for me was a cool, like I was attracted to it because I thought it was a cool opportunity to organize creative people, in that case mostly content writers, and to try to define some kind of shared enterprise or shared common goal that can benefit everyone involved and be a fun thing to be a part of. And originally it started as a decentralized newswire, and then we kind of morphed a bit more into the content as a service direction and figuring out if there was any kind of product market fit there, where clients would come and have some need for marketing content, and we would, the couple of us organizing stuff at PubDAO, would connect those clients with writers in our directory and try to broker deals there. And again, speaking as someone without any experience in business or business development or any of this kind of, not quite a staffing agency, but someone without really any sort of business experience, it was a fun educational experience for me. But I don't think I was quite cut out to find product market fit for that, or perhaps there wasn't enough demand. But then near the end of my involvement in PubDAO, we started moving a bit towards this chamber of commerce idea, this idea of being a chamber of commerce for Web3 publishing. But because PubDAO wasn't created with nonprofit intentions and a chamber of commerce is a type of nonprofit, there just wasn't naturally an organic fit there.
Okay. So all these pivots in direction that you mentioned, how did the coordination for that happen, and who are the people that are thinking about this? Can you kind of uh, describe how these pivots and changes in direction came to be?
Yeah, I mean it started and remains a Decrypt initiative, and I think that is where this notion of a chamber of commerce didn't quite mesh with what Decrypt originally
Mhm.
wanted it to be, which was a decentralized newswire. And I think they still have some plans to continue on with it, but I'm not in the loop anymore, so I'm not quite sure if there are any active developments there.
Okay, okay. Now I'm trying to understand the coordination when in your early days, as you reflect your early days of a journey in PubDAO and your involvement there, maybe what did the Discord look like, and how did you all come together and discuss what the DAO should focus on, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is important about all of this that I've learned is that it's important to have some concrete practice around which to build a community rather than just ideas and discussion points. Because as fun as discussion can be, if that's all that's holding a group of people together, then there's only so long people are willing to keep showing up to weekly meetings if we're just going to be talking about abstract stuff. And one of the things PubDAO was doing, in terms of concrete operations early on, was that people in PubDAO were writing articles for the Decrypt Learn section and getting them published on Decrypt. And there were a couple other publications in this early kind of syndication network, so there was a
Hmm.
central practice there of content writing, mostly like marketing content or explanatory content explaining Web3 technical stuff. And so that was sort of the practice that held together the community there. There was probably at its most active, maybe 3 or 4 dozen moderately active people in the Discord, mostly content writers. Um, but beyond that, the content as a service, when we started moving in that direction, we had a handful of clients come in, but I had a tough time figuring out product market fit there, and I couldn't quite secure any kind of real flow between content writers and clients that had some ongoing demand for content and how much they were willing to pay for it versus how much the content writers were looking to get. It was just a bit too too complex for someone with my lack of experience.
Okay, so when you describe product market fit, is it from the perspective of the incentive, or like how do you view that?
Yeah. In the case of what PubDAO was trying to do as a content as a service model, the product market fit would
Yep.
look like there's a steady supply of companies, mostly Web3 companies at that stage, that would need some kind of technical documentation or marketing content written, whether it's blog posts or newsletters or explanatory articles, stuff like that. And then, so that would be like the demand side. And then the supply side for PubDAO would just be like a steady sort of talent pool, quote unquote, of
Mhm.
content writers who would be willing to accept either gig work or would be willing to join a client on an ongoing basis. And so that's what we were looking for. Then there were also legal complexities that were a bit beyond my comprehension in terms of if PubDAO is going to be facilitating these payments, we would need some kind of a legal entity, and managing all that stuff was a bit beyond what I was capable of, at least at the time.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. So it sounds like PubDAO was like an agency of writers, but organized in like an aspiring decentralized manner.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it. It's and we never got to the point of having much be decentralized because we couldn't, like, there wasn't really anything too decentralized. It was still very free
Okay.
form and experimental and figuring a lot of this stuff out. Like, we deployed a Mala contract, but I don't think we ever used it. We had a couple iterations of tokens, but again, a lot of the question of tokens came into legal legal complications. Again, we don't want it to be a security; we just want it to be for governance. But yeah, there were aspirations to decentralize this, and I think you fairly describe it as an agency.
Interesting. Interesting. When you think back at your time in PubDAO, like maybe like what would you say were your early observations or your learnings, or how what was your reaction to the first DAO you became a part of? Did you like enjoy it? What did you benefit from it? And I see the challenges that you described a little bit about not being able to relate in terms of the PMF. But otherwise, what did you feel about like your experience being part of like this DAO?
One of the things I learned, and this is also applies to Lobby 3 and a couple of the others that I've been involved with, was like the difficulty in maintaining an active group of contributors, given how vague a mission is and how a lot of it is really still just discussion and ideation. And if you're asking for people's time, or people are volunteering their time without any compensation here because there wasn't any revenue, how long is that sustainable? And being cognizant of that, and respecting people's time and energy into these things. I think a lot of my early lessons were around things like that, and also, at least during the bull market, then there was a lot of emphasis on quote unquote community engagement and making sure there's a lot of activity in the Discord channel or the Discord server or the Telegram channel. And a lot of that I learned over the course of the last year and a half can be pretty can be pretty superficial, if like this
Mhm.
notion of community engagement is just having a weekly call where we just talk about stuff but don't necessarily even really do anything, or if people are just posting a bunch of a bunch of GMs or memes in a channel that kind of looks like a channel's active, but is there much substantial going on? And on the other side, a lot of the time there's a lot of work being done by some core team or some select few group of people, and that activity doesn't always manifest as activity on a Discord server or community engagement activity. So I think figuring out those metrics for how active and healthy a project is, how that doesn't always line up with like how active that project looks from the outside. You know.
Interesting. Would you say as a community, like the DAO was productive and getting a lot of media content shipped? Is that I mean, being that that is like the primary um task that the community was engaged in.
Yeah, in the case of PubDAO, people were writing. There were a handful of writers that were writing for the decrypt learn section, and I believe there were a couple other cases of people having content published on like the PubDAO Medium account or some other publication like that. So there were a handful of writers that were actively writing there. But I'd say the most useful or the most informative and the most fun aspect of all this too was just um, thinking about these business models and trying to figure out onboarding flows, like onboarding community members into various slots. Like if someone wanted to be an editor or a graphic designer or a writer, like figuring out how they would get situated in all those roles and then how we would connect those roles with clients that need that particular kind of talent. Like all of that kind of social systems design stuff was very, very useful exercises. And then also just making connections with a few of the other people in the PubDAO community at that stage. Those are probably the most valuable takeaways for me because at least I wasn't able to scale this beyond just a handful of writers there, given my lack of experience.
Got it, got it. Just curious, like what led you to PubDAO in the first place? Like, do you recollect? Were you interested in this idea of DAOs, and were you looking around, or you just happened to find like come to this particular project for some reason?
I think I found out about it through a Decrypt article, and it was at the time when I was
Hmm.
constantly reading Decrypt for like investment news and stuff like that when I was getting it when I was still at the phase of primarily being interested as a retail investor in all this technology. And then I remember seeing a post from Decrypt saying, "Oh, we're starting this decentralized newswire experiment. Join this Discord." And I joined there and was probably pretty passive for a while. I forget how long I was in there before I started being a bit more active. But yeah, just gradually talking with the other people who were leading it, people from Decrypt who were leading it, and becoming better acquainted with them and what this vision was, and offering ways to help, and then suggesting ideas and taking certain initiatives. And that, I think, like something you mentioned in the intro about how DAOs can change the nature of work. In this case,
Yeah.
my experience was interesting there. If you think about what happened, it's just someone shows up in a Discord server and likes what's going on, and then helps out here and there, and then gradually starts taking initiative in terms of suggesting project ideas or executing stuff like making a website or setting up a can be difficult to manage that too, because giving people orders if they're not being paid, and I'm also
Yeah.
kind of skeptical of paying people in native tokens unless they really consent to it. But I think that usually involves a lot of red flags for me. So I mean, it's very, very interesting and very experimental.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think like how I want, let's just candidly speaking, how I want to approach this stream and this show is like, the questions that I'm asking is like I'm trying to paint a picture of what it is like to be part of PubDAO. I think there's a lot of like this. I follow like a lot of DAO related podcasts and everything, and I think a lot of it is about like what they feel about like I mean a little philosophical about decentralized organizations and also about like people's own journey and things like that. One thing that is missing, I feel, is the DAO itself, because the DAO has like such a life of its own, and there's
Uh-huh.
like so much happening. So that is what I like. That is what I'm like trying to gauge from these conversations. And PubDAO, I think you've given a good picture of the initial how it started from Decrypt and what they were trying to do, and community coming together and kind of like I'm not sure if they were making a living, but I think they were making they were earning for contributing into publications. I just want to ask, like, how about you? Were you getting paid for your time in PubDAO?
Yeah, eventually, as I started getting a bit more involved in an administrative capacity, I started working for Decrypt as a contractor to help manage PubDAO,
Okay,
rather than
okay.
paid as a content writer per se. Yeah.
Got it, got it. The reason why I give this context is because anytime during the stream, if you have feedback for how the show should be conducted and everything, it's most welcome, and we can even chat after. But I'd like I'm happy to take your input on that. So, Spencer, I just want to take a short break and inform the audience about Lil Nouns. So may I quickly do that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, I'm also going to be submitting this episode on Lil Non's Prop House round that is focused on increasing voter participation through delegation. So, this little segment is a tease of how I aspire to engage the audience of DAO enthusiasts through the show to learn about Lil Non's DAO and ways to participate in the governance. Let me quickly open the website and show it on the screen. Give me a second there.
Is delegation already possible within the nouns framework? I don't have any experience within the nouns.
It absolutely is. Do you hold a Lil Noun, by the way?
Do I hold one? I do not.
Yeah. Okay. So delegation, yes, is possible within the nouns ecosystem. I think. Are you familiar with nouns at all?
Yeah, and like the nounish fork and the idea of minting one every day and that generating a treasury to be collectively governed. I think that's
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So Lil Nouns is a project that is exactly the same model as Nouns, but at a much lower entry point, which is like usually a reserve price of 0.15 ETH, where you're able to get into the ecosystem. And unlike Nouns, which is typically above 30 ETH an NFT, and what you experience with Lil Nouns is being part of a DAO that is, like you said, collectively governed through these NFTs as tokens. So Lil Nouns is also kind of a popular NFT, and a lot of people hold them without actually really thinking about using their NFTs for governance. And I feel that's kind of a missed opportunity. So I minted in Lil Nouns earlier this year just to learn about the Lil Nouns ecosystem, and each NFT is a governance token which you can use to vote on proposals, steer the direction of the DAO, and influence the funding of projects and builders. So yeah, so what is it exactly you vote on in Lil Nouns DAO? If you were actually looking to delegate, how do you make the call, and who do you delegate your token to? So if like should my prop for full time DAO win, I would like to explore these questions about Lil Non's delegation and guide the listeners through them in each episode of the show. And I'll create a guide on fulltimedao.com that anybody can click on and read about delegation practices. But how do you delegate your Lil Non's NFT? It's simple. Visit lilnouns.wtf, which is the website that you're looking at, and when you click on DAO over here, you enter the active proposals that Lil Nouns has right now, and here you should find a button called Delegate, where you will be able to delegate your Lil Noun to a fellow wallet, possibly a contributor who might actually be either actually participating in DAO governance, or maybe even you want to onboard somebody into the Lil Nouns ecosystem. Somebody might be interested in getting involved in Lil Nouns, but might not hold one. So there are ways where delegation can come to use, and And yeah, and I'm just pitching this episode as well as uh, yeah, I'm gonna talk about delegation during this show. How did you like my little plug there, Spencer?
I thought it was great, and I mean, I personally am a believer in delegation, and I think that's one of the things that I find most interesting about all this space is how it enables these governance practices that, at least to my knowledge, weren't really feasible before, like really liquid delegation, being able to delegate your vote and redelegate it at a moment's notice. And I think that's a great solution for like governance fatigue and voter disengagement. Is just enabling them to delegate to people that they trust. And it seems like this interface that you just walked through makes that very easy. So I'm glad to see that.
Yes, it does. So, where have you um, how has your involvement been with in regard to governance? I don't think PubDAO had a token. Am I right?
Yeah, we iterated on a couple kind of trial tokens, but we never ended up using them for any governance. Lobby3 had a fair amount of governance though, because it started out with a big treasury and I think a little over 800 original token holders, and so we've had probably a couple dozen proposals there, leading up to our sunset, our winding down strategy over the last couple months. So I've gotten a good amount of governance experience just from that, and now I'm having a bit more uh, from a whole other perspective as a consultant, like coming into a nascent organization and helping them build a governance system, which would involve either a token or like a voting whitelist, and building up the governance system from scratch, primarily learning from experiences at Lobby3, and a couple other DAOs like City DAO. But
Got
yeah,
it.
PubDAO itself didn't have any governance really.
Got it. Can you tell me about Lobby3? I'm just reading out Lobby3 on Twitter. It says Lobby3 is a non-profit on-chain organization dedicated to educating, innovating, and advocating at the intersection of civics and distributed ledger technology. Wow, and that was a mouthful. So, yes. Yeah, like how did you get into Lobby3 and what what kind of activities were you involved in over there?
Actually, funnily enough, I learned about that also through a Decrypt article. There was a Decrypt article that came out around 2 years ago, saying that Andrew Yang started a DAO. It's going to be an advocacy DAO, figuring out how to crowdsource policy opinions and have those opinions represented and lobbied, primarily in DC. And then so I looked into the project there and saw the plans, and it was about bringing the voices of Web3 to DC. Yeah, this is the new website we made, and so the founding team included Andrew Yang and some of his former campaign managers and teammates and associates there. And the vision, is still pretty resonant and poignant today, with a lot of the stand by crypto or stand with crypto, whatever the marketing campaign is by Coinbase. So it's still pretty resonant. But in the case of Lobby3, the real challenge there was figuring out how to do this as a DAO. But I guess to get to your question about how I got involved, learned about it through a Decrypt article. Again, just got involved through the Discord, bought a couple of the tokens through the original website, which is lobby3.io. That's the one that had the token minting interface, and it was very well marketed. Andrew Yang did a couple public interviews and everything, and I didn't have any connection with the founding team beforehand, so it's another situation of someone just showing up in a Discord and gradually volunteering time and ideas. Yeah, this is the original website, with all the original copy on it. So yeah, it had this really innovative token customization page where you can use other NFTs you had in your wallet to customize the faces of the little cube avatars there. Very, very well marketed and well designed.
Yeah, looks great. So when it comes to bringing the voices of Web3 to DC, how would you say, like, how how is that coordinated? I think this sounds like a very promising, very powerful mission, like Stand with Crypto as well, what they're aiming to do. And yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how do people come together on a Discord and execute on something like this? So what was the kind of the agenda like through your time at the DAO?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of I'd say the bulk of the work done with Lobby3 over the last 2 years was really figuring out what that means in concrete terms. Part of there's an affiliated nonprofit, Humanity Forward, that was also, I'm not sure if Andrew Yang founded it or is just involved with it, but Humanity Forward helped kind of steward Lobby3 early on and walk us through some of this stuff. And they're already an established advocacy group. They're focused on combating poverty and increasing financial inclusion, and they're, over the last couple of years, they've been placing more of an emphasis on blockchain technology and cryptocurrency technology as a means for financial inclusion. And so they've been organizing seminars and panels with legislators, working with groups like the Bipartisan Policy Center. And so they would have occasional panels with Congress people talking about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology and how it can be used to expand financial inclusion. And then as for what role Lobby3 played there was one if it was thorough
Uh,
enough for them to really.
Spencer, lost you there for the last 5 seconds when you said what role did Lobby 3 play there. Yeah, after that, just lost you after that.
Oh, sure. Can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yeah, I do hear you now. Yeah,
Cool.
all good.
Yeah, so as for what role Lobby3 played there, it was pretty undefined to start, but I think the initial idea was that people in Lobby3 can volunteer opinions and put together policy positions or research, how policies should be crafted to best enable this technology to realize its potential. And an early example of that we did early on in Lobby3 was a few of us put together this little report on stablecoin regulation, how the different kinds of stablecoins can perhaps be approached from a regulatory perspective. And I'm someone who doesn't have a background in economics or stablecoin design or lobbying, but I just put something together because I had some ideas about this and I thought it was a good point of departure. So that was an example of how Lobby3 functioned as a platform for someone like me who just showed up in a Discord server um, to share my opinions, policy positions, to translate my opinions into policy positions, and then have those handed off to people with more experience in the realm of advocacy. But I can't speak to how effective those ideas were in the report or if they really influenced anything. But it was an example of an early attempt at like living up to that idea of Lobby3 bringing the voices of Web3 to DC.
Interesting. How do you feel this initiative being a DAO? How do you feel that helped this movement or was counterproductive to it? Like, yeah.
I mean, I think the idea of it was very cool and very much in alignment with Web3 ethos of decentralization and community. We did run into some trouble when we started thinking about um, like foreign nationals getting involved in U.S. lobbying and their regulations around that. Like, people, whether
Mm.
financially contributing or contributing ideas. There's a lot of regulations, and myself not being a lawyer or a registered lobbyist, I was kind of starting from zero in terms of understanding a lot of this, and so
Mm.
that it actually opened up an interesting conversation we've been having with this group Holonym, and they make if you go to holonym.io, that should be their website. They make zero knowledge identity verification solutions, and so that was the idea. There was that we'd be able to use zero knowledge proofs to verify that a given wallet address or a given token holder in a DAO is a U.S. national without requiring them to publish their identity information. But a lot of that still isn't quite addressed with the regulations around a lot of this. So ultimately, I think the idea of a lobbying DAO runs into difficulty there, and that the people involved would probably need to be doxxed, and would also, in the case of the U.S., probably have to be U.S. nationals. But I'm no expert on the policies around that.
Okay. Was this like not volunteer run DAO, or was there like a payment structure in here?
Yeah, I mean, as far as DAO contributors like myself, we were paid through retroactive compensation proposals. And so you can go, if you check out the Lobby3 snapshot, you can scroll down and see all of the proposals we've had. And we would it was pretty much on a quarterly basis, where we would say these contributors did this over the last few months and they're asking for this much. And then the token holders would just approve that. So it was kind of unpredictable payment. Wasn't, but it was like community approved payment. It's sort of like we were invoicing the DAO in a way.
Got it. Like, did you used to spend a lot of time on like DAO work?
Oh yeah,
Last couple of years.
It got to the point where I was one of the three directors of Lobby3, because when it started, Lobby3 didn't have a legal entity, and so it was just kind of an amorphous group of token holders. And then naturally over time, a few of us kind of formed a core team, and for a while it was just myself and another person. And then as we started getting a bit more clarity on what kind of legal entity we needed, the few of us in this core team started putting that together and formed an entity with some legal advice from some folks at LexDAO, and formed a legal entity that we thought was actually conducive to decentralization. We formed a Wyoming unincorporated nonprofit association and intended to pursue 501c3 nonprofit status so that we could accept tax-deductible donations. And a very new world for me in terms of entity formation and pursuing nonprofit status and juggling a lot of this stuff. But it was like overall, the trajectory was, a bunch of people show up in a Discord, buy tokens, and just start kind of self-organizing governance structures. Like we propose proposal templates and all that stuff. And then gradually, as a lot of the people that bought the token originally kind of bought it as speculators, they wanted to flip the token. And so once they found out that Lobby3 wasn't really an investment opportunity, a lot of people kind of dropped off, but left this kind of core group of people that were actually passionate about advocacy and the implications this technology has for, self-sovereign finance and freedom of speech and a lot of this stuff and financial inclusion. Those people were left. But like as with any other DAO, that means the majority of token holders weren't really that active, and we would have benefited from actually implementing delegation, but we never did that. So ultimately, it went from this kind of amorphous group of token holder Discord members to an unincorporated nonprofit association with a board of directors, as we gradually learned that being a DAO kind of wasn't very feasible or viable if we wanted to be effective in this realm of advocacy. So I'm happy to talk a bit more about those lessons as well, but so complex, kind of tiresome but beautiful journey there.
Yeah, please do tell. Please do tell about your lessons as you were on this journey.
Yeah, a lot of it was really like intensive kind of systems design, and how does a group of people like this come together and decide on how to decide on things. And most of us didn't have any formal like a professional experience in organizational leadership, and so a lot of it was like figuring out a lot of this like first principles and how does this stuff work. And we got proposal templates instituted so that we would have a standardized way of proposing changes. One second here.
Yeah.
But then over time, we realized we do need a legal entity, and if we're going to have a legal entity, there needs to be some degree of centralization and central accountability. Like if the entity is to exist formally, there would need to be a responsible party for the IRS and handling a lot of tax stuff like that. But we chose a Wyoming UNA because of all the options available to us, which were pretty limited at the time. A UNA does kind of permit decentralized, relatively decentralized operational stuff, and that we don't actually need a board of directors. So the reason we chose a UNA was that we could have a board of directors, and we did, just to lead operations. But if Lobby3 were to ever reach a stage where it could actually function in a decentralized way, we'd be able to dissolve the board of directors. That's my understanding of what was permitted with that particular legal entity.
Okay. Like what you're doing here is like entirely new territory for you. Versus, of course, what you're doing previously in filmmaking, there is no connection at all. Like, I'm wondering how did you like enjoy this? What did you feel about this tsunami of new learnings and new territories you were getting into, especially with like incorporations and this legal matters and everything? I imagine um, it's, I don't know, like doesn't sound very fun as well, or was it?
I mean, in a almost kind of perverse way, I was interested in all the bureaucratic stuff and how the entities were formed and all of the clauses that we would have in the association agreement and kind of policies, internal policies, and all of these kind of ins and outs. What is actually interesting to me in terms of organizational design. And so that's like, we had to write our association agreement from scratch, like all the clauses and edge cases and everything, and internal governance systems, and then working with folks at LexDAO, who are cutting edge legal engineer types, in terms of how do we marry this more legalese internal bureaucratic process structures with tokens, Web3 technology, blockchain, designated governance platforms, etc. And a lot of it was really just early experimentation with a lot of this, and was very, very valuable in that respect. Like I still think it's a pretty open-ended question still for how DAOs should go about legal entity formation and where they want to form an entity and stuff like that. Like I think we're right at the phase still where best practices are still just only starting to emerge.
So, like, what do you feel about your own like development, learning and development through this, and like, how do you compare your career in DAOs in terms of the things that you're doing to your previous avatar in like a different profession? Like, what do you like about this? That you continue to you're still invested in this space. This is what you do right now. So like what is it that draws you to like continue to work in DAOs?
I'm really drawn to a lot of the systems design, mechanism design, or social design here in terms of building organizations, and also just working towards something that you believe in. I think is fulfilling, even if it doesn't result in much tangible progress or tangible impact. A lot of the stuff we were working at Lobby3 was kind of this almost invisible impact stuff of learning some of the early lessons about how such an impact group would go about organizing. And so I think that the best thing we can do at this point is just convey what we learned for whatever value it is to anyone else trying to do similar things. So I find all of that fulfilling, and also just building this stuff and connecting with with kindred spirits here, across these various other DAOs. I find all of that very interesting and fulfilling. And if I can make a living giving advice in this capacity, I think it's a cool thing to do if it can be worked out.
Amazing. All the best. When you say systems design, can you like illustrate an example of like what system design looks like, and or even organizational like design? If anything you have to share through screen shares, please do. Or if you want to illustrate that using the next project, which is JournoDAO. I don't know. How much time do we have, Spencer?
Oh, I can go as long as you want, and I can talk about this stuff forever.
Okay, great. Maybe we can enter into JournoDAO and you can describe like how your mindset as you were starting a new DAO, like what were your learnings that you were bringing in, and what did you want to what did you want to use as best practices? And somewhere along the line, I'd also like to understand systems design, just so that for anyone who is like considering getting involved in DAOs, for them to understand all this little opportunity and the value it brings to be able to design systems, if I may.
Sure, yeah, I can talk a little bit about what I mean by systems design here before going into JournoDAO. In this case, it's mostly like governance systems and how do like an arbitrarily sized group of people or an arbitrary number of people come together and come to collective decisions in an organized and methodical way, and how do you define what those processes look like, and then how do you ratify those processes. That's in the case of these DAOs, that's mostly the kind of systems design I'm talking about. Like in the case of
Hmm.
Lobby3, we set up a snapshot, but like how did we decide on snapshot? Like there kind of needs to be these first steps just taken through initiative, and then on snapshot we ratified proposal templates. So now that's accepted as the way, as like the process people would use to suggest further changes or to propose things for us all to decide on. And so that's sort of an example of systems design here, where members in this organization would connect to this website and go through the established process to suggest something for the whole group of people to work on. And then once it's passed, then it enters into this other phase where it's more about execution and just defining all the steps in this process and what is required of people at different steps in this process. I think that's sort of what I mean by systems design in this case, but I'm not sure if that
Got
if
it.
that answers your question.
It does answer. It does answer. A lot of like thinking work is what I'm understanding. Like,
Oh yeah. And it's like it's interesting, and this gets back to the point about how if there's a core team of people putting in a lot of this thinking work, it's not always evident if someone's just looking at a Discord and doesn't see, oh, there hasn't been a post in 8 days, or there's only been 3 posts in the last month or something. When a lot of the work being done is kind of a bit more behind the scenes, and to what extent is that damaging to the organization? Should it all just be out in public? If you are doing it out in public, that does invite a lot more noise, which complicates things and requires even more thinking work, which is difficult if people aren't getting paid or are only potentially getting paid through retroactive compensations. So yeah, a lot of it is just thinking work that doesn't always manifest outwardly as being valuable, but is necessary nonetheless. If that makes any sense.
yeah. And additionally, I think documentation, like everything that you're
Definitely.
describing, also requires like extensive, documentation and planning. So how does this happen? Like what are the tools that you use to coordinate all of these systems that you're designing and communicating to the community?
Yeah, you're totally right about documentation there, and that's something we could have done a bit better in the early stages of Lobby 3. Like the closest thing we have to documentation there is, I think, one of the first proposals that just lays out the template for the proposal. I think that's like the closest thing we had to a like governance documentation. Some other stuff here like slide decks and whatnot. But having some kind of documentation that answers a lot of these questions, so that you're not always having to start from scratch with every new person that shows up and wants to learn how things work. I think you're totally right in that having clear, simple documentation is useful for this.
Did you as well find yourself doing a lot of like writing work in your DAO journey? Like, is that apart from like coordinating, like how, is like yeah, where does what kind of activity in terms of skill maybe is your like are you do you get hands on with?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always liked writing. I mean, I studied screenwriting, very different kind of writing, but lately for the last couple of years, it's mostly just been short short essays and articles exploring technical stuff for mostly relating to DAOs. Like one of the things we did in PubDAO, actually, a few of us got together and put together this little sort of journal on DAO design. I can see if I can share a link with you. It's called Automatos, and a few of us, like, we put together this series of 9 short articles about various aspects of DAO design, and it touches on a lot of the stuff we're talking about here. I can send you a link if you wanted to check that out.
Yeah. Is that the one you sent me last?
Oh, that was a newsletter that I've personally started writing over the last couple months for my LLC. But it also touches on a lot of similar stuff. I'll send you this that we did at PubDAO.
Okay.
I'll send it to you in Discord. So a few of us put this together, freely accessible series of articles with little collectible editions, and a lot of this writing touches on what we're talking about here.
Automatos is an experimental journal about DAO design, incubated and published by PubDAO. Okay. Interesting. And you wrote a lot of these?
Yes, I wrote, I think, 4 of those 9, I believe.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, there's so much to learn, and I feel like there's a lot of people have put so much like thought into DAOs, and DAOs are like one of the coolest manifestations of what Web3 has to offer right now. While NFTs and crypto, everything is like we are seeing the ups and downs of it. DAOs as well, but at least the kind of I don't know, like it's very powerful what we are seeing with DAOs, and I think thanks to the work you're doing, all of this is a great foundation for future of decentralized organizations.
I'm hoping, and a lot of this, like, thankfully, Arweave Mirror deploys all these things to Arweave too, so that they're there, hopefully forever. But yeah, one of the difficulties I had with this was just figuring out how to market it. Like, we put all this time into writing this and doing all the graphic design, and I just had no idea how to bring awareness to it.
Like, how do you feel like if like others like who are interested in the space and want to become better DAO contributors or better DAO creators, how do they benefit from your writings? I know read is a clear answer. Go read, but like what among these, like, would you have any suggestion on your top reading over here, and why should someone be focusing on some of these topics?
Yeah, I would say these topics are more geared towards people that want to like build DAOs or set up the systems that DAOs are built on. These are a bit less intended for people that kind of want to get involved in a DAO that other people are handling all the admin stuff for. But I would say in general, my advice for anyone who wants to get involved in a DAO in a bit more of a passive capacity, or at least not so much like a leadership or a executive kind of admin capacity, is just to have some kind of level of tolerance or patience for how amorphous and complex a lot of this stuff is, and especially when we get into questions of like legal risks and legal accountability and liability. A lot of that makes it tough to actually live up to the values of Web3 in terms of being decentralized and being pseudonymous. A lot of those values kind of rub up against the legal reality. So just like be cognizant of that, and I guess know that your time and your energy is valuable, and that there are DAOs out there that just want free labor and will pay you in in native currency. So like be cognizant of that if what they're paying you in something that isn't really liquid at all. But also that a lot of these DAOs are nonprofits in nature and can't really offer competitive rates in terms of paying contributors for leadership. I guess just my advice at this stage is, while DAOs are at this early stage, just just to be aware of all these different complex moving pieces, and just make sure that you find it fulfilling enough to put your time into, if you're not being like competitively compensated for your time. You just find it rewarding or fulfilling in some other sense.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Now let's get into JournoDAO. JournoDAO is a project that you are one of the founding members of JournoDAO, and I'm looking at the website. It is an incubator for projects that transform and rethink the journalism ecosystem. So, can you begin with how did you come up with this idea of creating a DAO related to in regards to journalism, and what were the initial moments that led to getting this started?
Sure. Yeah. So this was started by a journalist named Eric Mack, and I met Eric originally in the PubDAO Discord server, and we were both drawn there because we're interested in publishing and how this technology can perhaps change how publishing works. And then as PubDAO evolved a bit, it was clear that PubDAO was a bit more about like marketing content, and there was a different sort of set of questions and curiosities regarding journalism in particular. And so Eric Mack started the JournoDAO server and invited me and invited a few other people, and that started growing into a little bit of a journalism Web3 intersection community. And a few of us kind of stuck together a bit more closely over the coming months, and now I think a little over 2 years to form this JournoDAO core team. And similar to PubDAO, we haven't really needed any token or anything for JournoDAO so far. It's really just been a small handful of people talking about how journalism can benefit from this. We've been to a few journalism conferences. We went to Online News Association conference for the last 2 years, and we're sort of kind of unofficially the Web3 spokespeople there. There's still a lot of kind of limited and limited mainstream understanding of this technology and what's possible with it. And so we found that a large role that JournoDAO would need to be playing since it started and still right now is just being an interface between the worlds of Web3 and journalism, and answering questions for what this technology can do. We had a couple of panels at this last Online News Association conference in Philadelphia. And most of what we've been talking about so far has been how this technology and similar technologies, whether it's blockchain or non-blockchain ones like IPFS, or I guess pseudo blockchain ones like Arweave, how like as a storage layer on this kind of peer-to-peer perma-web storage layer, it's a really great way to ensure that your content, that your work as a journalist lives on beyond whether like maybe your publication runs out of business or they migrate to a new website, and your content
Just lost you there for the last 5 seconds, Spencer. Please continue. That's fine.
get into more details there. But yeah, like some of these basic questions for how can this technology actually tangibly benefit the industry and the field of journalism. It's been a really like abstract set of questions so far for the last 2 years, but over the last month or so, over the last month or two, it's really started solidifying more into something we can ship. And so I'm happy to talk a bit more about that. We're working with Ethereum attestation service to put together a little system for how journalists and content creators at large, but we're focusing on journalists, can use this technology to ensure that their content will live on the the quote unquote perma web. And also it has interesting implications for content authentication, like being able to verify that a piece of content came from a certain author, came from a certain author's wallet address, stuff like that. So happy to go into more details if there's time for that.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the general journey of JournoDAO so far.
Yeah. I'd love to dive into JournoDAO. Like, if you can show me like anything like through a screen share on
Sure.
Discord um, of coming of some of this, uh, coming together of some of this. I think that'll be cool. Additionally, like I just wanted to just make a note of this observation is that I think like all of these projects I think started with a very first of all of these like are very ambitious projects. I think here how you're trying to find the purpose for Web3 in journalism. Like, I think a lot of what I'm noticing is a lot of like thinking work and figuring out what are we trying to do in this space as like a community of journalists. Is like this is what is happening, and then eventually beginning to roll out like products. So is this like I don't know if I'm being clear with my articulation, but do you feel that like in journey of a DAO, has this been like a common pattern that you've seen, like of this whole like figuring out like purpose of what a DAO needs to be doing, and like what yeah is that like a key challenge as well?
You're totally right. At least in the experiences I've had with PubDAO, Lobby3, and JournoDAO, and I wasn't involved in City DAO from the start, but I've seen that they've had a similar journey in this sense, especially with these really ambitious missions, DAOs with ambitious missions. A lot of it, the early work is this thinking work, this ideation, figuring out what is it in concrete terms that we actually should be focusing and channeling our efforts towards, and making sure that it's realistic and not just vapor vibes or just memeable content that won't be able to find product market fit or won't be able to financially sustain itself, or if people lose interest and the whole thing isn't financially sustainable, then it'll just stall out. And in our cases, all three of them, PubDAO, Lobby3, and JournoDAO, did all have these kind of ambitious mission statements. And the vast bulk of the early work was just iterating on the ideas around how to actually implement these missions and how to actually tangibly make progress toward these missions. And they all took very different directions. And JournoDAO is the one that I'm still involved with. That's the one that I'm still involved with, and that is still active. I think Decrypt may still have some plans for PubDAO, but I'm not sure. And then Lobby3, we've winded down. But to answer your question about screen share, I am able to
Yeah.
screen share something that illustrates what JournoDAO is working on right now.
Yes.
Do you still want me to do that?
Yes. Please do that.
Okay, here we go. Share this Miro board.
I think like what yeah I think something that with DAOs, when it comes to DAOs, I feel I can't go to like people working at companies and ask them to share like their internal documents. Whereas with
Yeah.
with DAOs, I mean I don't even. I mean, of course, I'd like to ask you for permission for showing something like this. But in general, I can simply assume safely that these documents are probably like anybody can access them, and it just feels safe to even inquire about sharing such strategic high value discussions that otherwise would not be would probably not be cool to simply ask.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. I never thought about it like that, but that is a common thread with all of these, with PubDAO, Lobby3, and JournoDAOs. All these things are these are kind of like open source organizations in a way. Like with Lobby3, we formed the entity that our bylaws or our association agreement. That's all public. All of the proposals we made on Snapshot are all public. The Discord
Mm.
history for all these things, it's all public. All the documentation we have, all public. So like that is something that's I would agree is probably radically different from traditional organizations where they're kind of siloed all this stuff, and only certain people are able to access it, and they're not really conducive to being publicly shared. I guess a lot of that is more like if they're publicly traded and there's like insider information and whatnot. Whereas all these groups that I'm talking about weren't really weren't really about making a profit and weren't publicly traded and perhaps had a different set of constraints or responsibilities. But I totally agree. That's one of the things I like about all this too, is that they're all open. You can ask people to see the documentation and see stuff like this. So I agree. That's a cool distinction.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, what are you showing us here?
Sure. Yeah. So this is what JournoDAO is working on now, and it's sort of the culmination of what we've been talking about over the last 2 years about how this technology can actually help the field of journalism. And we're using Ethereum attestation service. They just had, I believe they just had an episode on the Bankless podcast. They're a public good. They're essentially, it's sort of like forms that you can fill out and publish on chain. And so you can view them as certificates. You can view it as like this one wallet address is vouching for something that another wallet address has done, or you can use it to as like you can use it to sign documents. It's a very high level kind of multi-purpose public good, and we're talking about using these attestations specifically with Ethereum attestation service to kind of build this indexing system for content, and especially journalistic content that's stored on some arbitrary storage layer. So it could be Arweave, like right here, or IPFS. But the idea is we want to build out this system that would allow content creators, again with an emphasis on journalists, to publish their content to really secure public databases that they can be confident that the content will be around for a very long time and won't just disappear if their publication goes under or something. So to publish content to Arweave, IPFS storage layers like this, and then to use this system of schemas to actually index certain bits of information about that content so that you can search for it. You can search for who's written what and where's that content stored. And what's really exciting about all this, without getting into all the details about how these different attestations reference each other, is that it's very inexpensive. We wouldn't be deploying the layer two. It would be, if we're using blockchains and other peer-to-peer storage layers, this is actually a system that would let people publish content and organize it and search originally.
Just losing you a little bit, Spencer.
Sure.
Yeah. Can you just repeat the last 10 seconds?
Sure. Yeah. So without getting into much of the details about how these technical details about how these attestations reference each other, we're basically just trying to build a system that allows content creators, especially journalists, to publish content to a censorship resistant storage layer that they can be confident will store that data for a long time without it deprecating or losing access to it. So storing the content for a long time in a censorship resistant way, and then also being able to navigate who posted what content when, in the interest of combating misinformation and being able to verify that a specific person wrote a specific piece of content or published a specific piece of content at a specific time. And all of this would be permissionless, would be public good. It wouldn't cost JournoDAO almost anything to keep something like this going, which is what I'm excited about. That gets into the nature of funding for this. We wouldn't really need any revenue to keep something like this going. So it's not something that would disappear, especially if we're using Ethereum attestation service to build it. It's once we deploy it, it's there. It's just a matter of how difficult it is user experience wise to use it. And so then the question is, we can make an interface for people to use this and to make it easier. But then if for whatever reason we're not even able to maintain an interface, people could still use this. It's all still there. And that's what excites me about this. But I'm not sure if that was too high level to get into what the actual point of all this is. So I'm happy to state any of that.
Is this a standard that is being developed by JournoDAO for journalists to work on chain?
Essentially, yeah. Essentially, yeah. And we're building this in a way that's broader than just journalists. But once we
Mm,
have this ready, we're going to be working with journalists and explaining the value proposition to journalists. And the main value proposition to journalists, at least in our opinion, is censorship resistant storage layers. So you can post, say some write up that documents some regional conflict, and maybe it's politically sensitive. And if you deploy it onto Arweave or IPFS, to my knowledge, a state actor wouldn't be able to take it down unless
right.
I'm misunderstanding something like this. So like that's a very powerful capability, and it's also
Indeed.
expensive too. And that's an exciting combination of things here, and that's what we're trying to convey to journalists, traditional online journalists, that this technology doesn't. You don't have to get into the whole cryptocurrency aspect of speculation and whatnot. There's just storage layer queryability stuff that's sounds really boring at first, but when you think about what it enables you to do, it's actually pretty radical.
Hmm. How are journalists supposed to use this, interact with it, and use this method?
So yeah, the idea here is that we would make some simple interface that would allow a journalist to upload a file, whether it's like a PDF, let's just say a PDF of an article they've written, some like multimedia article, and then they would upload the file, they would upload their name, any other bits of metadata about that file, like a name or a version or any other kind of notes or memos, and then they would publish it that way on the front end. And on the back end, we would handle actually uploading that file to Arweave and or IPFS and or anything like that, and then also deploying attestations for title, um, title, Arweave hash. So after we publish it to Arweave, we would include a hash of it, and we would structure all the stuff, the name of the author, all that. We would deploy various attestations on chain, probably on a layer 2, and then that way the writer, the journalist will have their content published on a censorship resistant layer, and also have all of this kind of indexing stuff here, so that there's an on-chain presence or certificate of the fact that they published it to Arweave or IPFS. But we just want to abstract away all this complexity for journalists. Does that answer?
Interesting. Yeah, it does. It does. Super. So, what did it take for JournoDAO to like arrive at this solution? Like, what has been the what has been the journey of thinking through all of this and putting it down
It's the
on
same point you
board?
made.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's the same point you made earlier about a lot of thinking work and ideation, and um, really looking and analyzing the whole situation of what currently works with the current media landscape. What are the risks? Um, what would what are the problems that journalists face? How can this technology address some of those problems? And like I'm not someone with a journalistic background, but the other JournoDAO founding members are, and so they had more experience to what the kind of pain points of traditional journalism are, and how this technology can help. And I'm just more like systems, again, just kind of systems design. In this case, it's not as much social systems design, but how do these little bits of information relate to one another? And I'm also not quite a programmer, but just like the technical stuff like this, and logistical systems, that's where I came into place. And so like 2 years essentially of thinking about all this, and then right around a little before this last ETH Denver, I got acquainted with the team at Ethereum Attestation Service, and was instantly obsessed with what they were building there, because you can just see all these, such a limitless amount of possibilities with what you can do there very inexpensively, in a way that's not extractive. It's a public good. um, and then thinking about all the journalistic problems in the context of what's possible with stuff like Ethereum Attestation Service, we just kind of gradually started thinking that oh well, maybe we should just be facilitating how journalists interact with this technology in terms of publishing it and searching for content and navigating and indexing content. And we just thought something like Ethereum attestation service made a good fit for that. So I would say ultimately the bulk of that work was just kind of trial and error in terms of conceptualizing what it is we even should be doing, you know?
Mhm. Got it. Got it. Super interesting. Um, yeah, just like as I hear you talking about all the things that you're doing, I feel like this is all. I feel it's difficult work. It takes a lot for you to uh, for somebody to actually take the time and come up with all of this and yeah not yeah I just think it's like a lot of difficult work, and I think it's good work. It has to be done by somebody, and it's like really appreciate that. I appreciate that I'm getting to find out about this from you. And I think the space, the DAO ecosystem is filled with a lot of like great contributors such as yourself, who are doing adding a lot of like value, social good into these tiny ecosystems, whether it is journalism or lobbying, and I like it is unclear where it is headed, but it's a lot of good work that is happening.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words there, and thankfully, I enjoy thinking about all this stuff. A lot of it is
Thankfully,
kind of thick and really fascinating in a variety of ways. And I like the people that are also working on this too. That's a big part of it. Just finding people who are drawn to similar things and also find this fulfilling enough to put time and effort into, even if that time and effort isn't competitively compensated. I think it's just a whole other kind of fulfillment that comes with a lot of this stuff. At least I find.
awesome. Thank you for sharing. Just as a final note, I just want to get a vibe check on DAOs in general from you. What do you feel about like career in DAOs, and like even right now, what is the vibe you're getting for this ecosystem and the kind of people that are involved, and how do you feel about the future of this space?
I I th- I'm still very optimistic about how this technology can be used in organizations. I'm starting to think about it in terms of on-chain organizations rather than just decentralized ones. I think that like we can decentralize certain aspects of these things in new ways. Like you can have a whole community of token holders represented by a Moloch contract and have that built into like a legal architecture of an organization in ways that I don't think were quite possible beforehand. And so all of that's very interesting. I just still think there's a time and place for decentralization. Um, and maybe some of the better use cases of this technology will be in organizations that aren't fully decentralized but have some kind of hierarchy, and maybe there's just like the decentralized oversight or community oversight, and that's how decentralization is embodied there. So I'm still a big believer in the technology, and I think I prefer these bear market conditions where there isn't as much speculation about all this and isn't as much BS community engagement stuff going on. I kind of think it's like a higher signal environment. So I appreciate that as well. But also, I appreciate how motivated everyone in this space is to solve these really fundamental coordination problems that underpin a lot of the problems we're trying to solve in the world, but which are so abstract and high level that they're not always recognized as being as important as they are.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. And if you wanted to like learn about um, any curiosity in the DAO space that you want to like explore, just as a data point for me as I go forward uh, in this project, like any DAOs that's on your mind, or anything in particular, any DAO topic in particular you feel needs, uh, yeah, you feel a craving for more information on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we tried working a bit towards at the end of PubDAO was mentioned this Chamber of Commerce idea. I still think there's really interesting potential there for chambers of commerce to exist on chain with a variety of on chain businesses and organizations that can collectively make like inter-organizational decisions through a nonprofit chamber of commerce and have all of those decisions be publicly publicly verifiable and transparent on chain. I think that's really cool. I'm excited to see something like that. There are already some groups like LexDAO is a guild of legal engineers. It may, or if not LexDAO, then one of its affiliate organizations may actually be pursuing the nonprofit status for a chamber of commerce. So that's one example that I'm kind of aware of, but it's something that can apply to almost any industry. Like we were exploring it for publishing, didn't quite take off, but that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to.
Awesome. Now, like as we close, yeah, Spencer, were you saying something?
Oh no, I'm not saying anything.
I'm not able to hear you actually.
Oh, can you?
Okay,
can
I can
hear
hear
me?
you now. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I
Um,
wasn't saying.
okay. So as we close this, if people like want to reach out to you, like what is it? Would you wanna like what is what would you be offering as a consultant maybe like for somebody who's reached this part of this video probably is very interested in DAOs and how will you be able to help them?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, anyone's free to reach out to me on X or Twitter. I'm Clinomenic. Also in the Lens and Farcaster ecosystems, I'm Clinomenic. You can go to the website www.clinomenic.com. I got my email listed there. Feel free to contact me any of those ways. And if you think any of these lessons are valuable to anything you're working on, happy to talk about that. That's sort of what I'm trying to build the consultancy model around. Maybe it'll maybe just probably be like an hourly thing. I'm still working out how that would best work. But or if you just want to talk about this on some social media thing in a less formal capacity, then just hit me up.
Awesome. um, awesome, Spencer, thank you so much. I think it has been great hearing from you, and thank you for sharing all your wisdom from your experiences in DAOs.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing what other interviews you do and how this goes in the Little Nouns ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, Spencer.
You too.